The chain of events that made Binta venture deep into the evil forest where she met the evil goblin started with a piercing scream. Before we continue, please comment where you're watching from, and smash that subscribe button to help me on my road to 1K subscribers. Thank you. Now, back to our story. That morning, a sharp and scary scream erupted from Binta's house without a warning. Binta was on her way back from the stream where she had gone to fetch water, clueless about what was about to happen. When she heard the familiar scream, she quickly threw her water pot on the footpath, the clay shattering against the stony earth. "Mama!" she shouted as she sped across the village. By the time she reached home, thick black smoke was already curling into the sky. Their small hut was on fire, the angry flames dancing like hungry spirits. Villagers were shouting and running with buckets, but it was too late. The house was gone. Their only room, the kitchen, and the food store, all burnt to ashes. Inside the house, her mother lay on the floor, unconscious. One of the neighbor women held her head gently. "She fainted," the woman said. "We were trying to carry her out when the fire started." Binta dropped to her knees, her heart beating so fast, she thought it would explode in her chest. "Mama, Mama, please wake up." But her mother didn't move. And that was not Binta's first stroke of bad luck. Earlier that week, her mother had come home from the farm, crying and wailing. Some nomadic cattle farmers had entered their cassava farm overnight with their cows and grazed on the plants until there was nothing left to harvest. The farm was their only source of hope since Binta's father died in a freak farm accident months ago when he fell from a palm tree while harvesting palm wine. And now, their house was lost to a mysterious fire outbreak nobody could explain. Even before the fire, the villagers instinctively avoided Binta and her mother. They felt like they were marked with bad luck. By evening that day, the village square buzzed with voices. The village chief, a tall man with thick eyebrows and a deep voice, stood in front of the burnt house, surrounded by concerned villagers. He pointed at Binta like she was dirt. "Your family has brought a curse to this land," he shouted. "First, your father dies strangely. Then your house burns. Now your mother is unconscious like a corpse. Clearly, you have offended the gods and they're punishing you with misfortune." Binta looked around, hoping someone, anyone, would speak for her. But even her friends kept quiet. Some looked away. Some stared like she was already a ghost. The chief continued, "From this day forward, the land your family farms belongs to your lenders. They will sell it to settle your debts. May the gods be merciful and lift your family's misfortune." Binta wanted to scream, to fight, but she looked at her unconscious mother lying on a borrowed mat in the shade. She had no strength for battle. They had lost everything already. Their home, their farmland, their name. And the worst part? Her mother hadn't opened her eyes since the fire incident. That evening, the sky darkened too early. Heavy clouds gathered like a warning. Binta sat beside her mother, wiping her face with a wet cloth. The village herbalist had come and gone, shaking his head. "If you can find miracle leaves," he said, "maybe she will wake." But that leaf grows deep, far inside the forbidden part of the forest. Everyone knew that forest. People said it moved when you weren't looking, that it had no end, that crying sounds from the forest could be heard clearly at night. Binta stared at the trees in the distance. The wind whispered through them like voices. She looked at her mother one more time, still breathing, but weak. She tied her scarf, picked up a small empty calabash, and stood. "I'll go," she whispered. The entrance of the forest was quiet. Birds didn't chirp. Leaves didn't rustle. Not even the usual crickets sang their evening songs. As she stepped in, the air turned heavy, like it didn't want her there. The trees were tall and twisted, their branches like claws. The deeper she walked, the darker it became, even though the sun hadn't fully set. At first, she kept to the known path. Then, slowly, the ground began to change, soft and wet like sponge. Roots spread everywhere. Vines curled across the way, forming strange shapes like symbols. Then she heard it, a soft sound like someone crying. Binta froze. It was distant, but not far. A voice, soft and high like a child's, sobbing gently. She turned slowly, but saw nothing. She pressed forward. "Don't be afraid," she whispered to herself. "It's just the wind. Only the wind." But deep down, she knew it wasn't. The forest was listening. Just as she reached a small clearing, her feet sank into soft, muddy ground. She stumbled forward and looked up. And there it was. A crooked tree, dead and black, with webs hanging like torn cloth. Beneath it sat a small, crying figure, facing away from her. His shoulders were shaking as he cried. The mat beneath him was old, filthy, and torn at the edges. His hair looked like tangled ropes, and his skin, Binta couldn't tell. It was neither young nor old, neither human nor beast. The crying stopped. There was an eerie silence. Then slowly, the figure turned his head. Two glowing red eyes stared directly into hers. Binta's breath caught in her throat as she realized that the stories were true. This was the goblin her mother told her stories about. The cursed spirit of the forest, always weeping, always holding his mat. It was said that anyone who saw him would be haunted by misfortune or disappear forever. Her legs wanted to run. Her body screamed to turn back. But behind her was a dead father, a dying mother, a burned home, and a stolen farm. There was no turning back. The goblin blinked slowly. Then he smiled, a crooked, thin smile full of secrets. "Why have you come here, girl who walks with sorrow?" His voice was soft, but it echoed in the trees. Binta opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The forest had gone completely silent again. Even the wind held its breath. Binta couldn't move. The red eyes of the goblin glowed like coals, watching her every breath. He didn't blink. He didn't speak again. He just stared. Then, snap, a tree branch broke somewhere behind her. She spun around but saw nothing. When she turned back, the goblin was gone. Only the dirty mat remained, spread under the crooked tree. Then the crying returned, faint, echoing. But now it sounded like it was coming from everywhere. Binta took a shaky step forward, heart thudding. "Mamau," she whispered. "Please hold on for me." She picked a narrow path to her left and kept walking, her hands shaking as she held the empty calabash to her chest like a shield. The deeper she went, the more the forest began to change. The trees no longer looked like trees. They bent over the path like they were whispering secrets to each other. Roots stuck out of the ground like bony fingers. The air became thick and wet, like steam. The smell of rotting leaves, damp earth, and something sharp, like metal filled her nose. Suddenly, the muddy ground beneath her squelched. She looked down, and what she saw made her scream as she froze with fear. It was blood. At least, it looked like blood, thick, dark, and slow-moving, oozing out from under the soil. She stumbled backward, her bare foot slipping, nearly dropping the calabash. A voice whispered, "Go back, before it's too late." She turned sharply again but saw nothing. Another voice followed immediately, deeper this time. "No, let her come in." A low laugh rolled through the trees. Binta tightened her scarf and kept walking. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She didn't stop. Her mother's life depended on it. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. She wasn't sure. Time had no meaning in this place. The light above had faded completely. Only a soft, blue mist now lit her way. She came to a fork in the path. Left, where bones hung from the trees like wind chimes, and right, where the fog was so thick she couldn't see more than 2 steps ahead. She closed her eyes and whispered, "God, please lead me." After waiting at the junction for a few minutes, she had a strong feeling in her gut to turn right into the fog. The moment she stepped on the path, the fog swallowed her whole. She could barely breathe. The air was too thick. Her body felt heavier with every step. Her thoughts became slow, confused, like something was trying to take over her mind. Then she heard it again. The sound of somebody crying. But this time, it was her mother's voice. "Binta, help me. I'm cold. I'm so cold." Binta stopped. "No," she said firmly. "That's not real." She pressed on, but the voice continued calling to her. growing louder and more desperate. "Binta, don't leave me here. Please, Binta." Her legs shook. Her arms trembled. She dropped to her knees, covered her ears, and screamed, "You are not my mother." And suddenly, there was silence. The fog cleared just enough for her to see where she had reached. A strange clearing stood ahead. In the center, a circle of red stones surrounded a small tree with pitch-black leaves. And behind that tree, the goblin stood waiting. This time, he wasn't crying. He smiled when he saw her. A slow, wide grin full of rot and madness. "You are stronger than you look," he said, tilting his head. "Most run back before the fog speaks." "I came for the miracle leaf," Binta said, her voice shaking but steady. He walked around the black tree slowly, dragging his mat behind him. "Everything has a price in this forest, even leaves." "I'm not afraid to pay. I need it to save my mother," Binta replied. The goblin's smile widened. "Good, because tonight, you will pay with more than fear." Suddenly, the ground shook. The red stones began to glow. Shadows rose from the corners of the forest, stretching like living things, surrounding the circle. The goblin leaned close, his face inches from hers. His breath smelled like old earth and wet cloth. "You want the leaf," he whispered. "Then play my game. I'll give you 3 trials. Survive them and you may leave." Binta didn't blink. Even though she was scared, she was determined to get the miracle leaf to save her mother before leaving the forest. "Then let's begin," she said boldly. The goblin stepped aside and pointed to the black tree. A single miracle leaf floated down gently and landed at the base of the tree. He raised one long finger. "Trial 1, take the leaf." "That's it?" Binta wondered. She stepped forward towards the tree, but suddenly, the soil around the tree cracked. Dozens of white, human hands burst from the earth, grabbing, clawing, pulling at the air. The crying returned, now louder and fuller, dozens of voices weeping and laughing at once. Binta took a step back. The goblin clapped slowly. "Ah, you see? Every step forward is a step through the dead. These are those who took on my trials and failed." The hands waved, some reaching for her legs. Binta stared at the leaf. It was within reach. Just 3 steps and she could have it. She gritted her teeth. As soon as she took the first step, a cold hand grazed her ankle. The sudden contact frightened her a little, but she stood first, then she took another step. This time, a firm grip wrapped around her ankle. Still, she remained focused and determined to get the miracle leaf. When she took the 3rd step, a hand grabbed her wrist and began to pull her down. She screamed and kicked, struggling to break free from the grip. "Let me go!" she shouted, lunging forward. She grabbed the leaf with her free hand and fell flat out of the circle, breathless. Instantly, the leaf disappeared, the hands sank into the ground, and the crying stopped. She touched the leaf, and thus, she had passed the first trial. The goblin grinned wider. "Well done, little storm. But don't get comfortable, for the next trial will be a lot harder than this." Then, he pointed to the mat on the floor. "Sit. The mat will show you what it wants. And you must watch, without looking away." Binta wiped sweat from her face. The worst was still ahead. And something in her gut told her, this mat could break her. Binta stared at the mat. It looked harmless now, just an old, tattered thing, stained with years of dirt and tears. But something inside her warned, this is where the actual fear begins. "Sit," the goblin said again, his voice low and hungry. She stepped forward slowly. After hesitating for a moment, she sat on the edge of the mat. The mat was warm, like it had been sitting under a fire. The moment she sat down, the world around her vanished. The forest, the goblin, the tree, they were all gone. She was no longer in the clearing. She was back in the village, but not as it was. This place was burned. The sky above was black with smoke. Ash floated down like snowflakes. The huts were nothing but charred frames. Screams echoed from every direction. Binta stood up in the vision, confused. "What is this?" Then she saw her mother tied to a stake in the middle of the square, flames licking her feet. "Mama!" Binta screamed. She tried to run, but her feet were frozen to the ground. From behind, villagers appeared, pointing and screaming furiously. "You brought this curse upon us with your bad luck. You've angered the spirits. Now we all burn." One by one, their faces melted, turning to skulls with empty sockets. Her mother's scream pierced the air. "Binta, help me. I'm trying." Binta cried, tears running down her face. But the fire only grew taller. Then, out of the flames, stepped the goblin. But this time, his eyes were pure black, and his smile stretched unnaturally across his face. He walked through the fire like it was water. "This is your second trial," he said. "You must watch everything burn without looking away." "No!" Binta sobbed. "Please, no." But the vision wouldn't end. She watched her mother scream and burn. She watched the villagers turn to ash. She cried and wailed at the sight of her mother burning. Then, she heard a tiny whisper. "Do not believe what you see." It was faint, like wind, like a memory. The truth is not always what looks real. Hold your mind. Binta took a deep breath. This is not real. She stood up, straightened her back, and stared at the burning figure. "You're a liar," she shouted. "This is not my mother's end. This is not my future." As she said this, the goblin stopped smiling and snapped his fingers. Instantly, the flames vanished. The ash disappeared. The sky cleared, and the clearing returned. Binta was back on the mat, sweating, shaking, eyes wide with terror, but alive. The goblin stood across from her, his smile now tighter. "Only few survive the mat," he said. "You are strong, but the game is not over." He crouched low, eyes narrowing. One trial remains. He pointed to the forest. Far behind the black tree, a path opened. "Final trial," he said, handing her the calabash she had brought to the forest, with a miracle leaf inside. "You may leave the forest. But listen well. A child is crying at the end of that path." His voice grew cold. "If you help the child, you stay behind." Binta's stomach twisted. "But if I leave the child, I go free." "Yes," the goblin nodded. She gripped the calabash tightly, her hands trembling slightly. "Choose," he whispered, nudging her towards the path. Binta walked down the path slowly. Her legs ached, and her spirit felt stretched thin. At the end of the path was a small pool of water, glowing faintly. Beside it sat a thin and dirty 4-year-old child, crying softly. "Help me," the child whimpered. "Please don't leave me here." Binta froze. She didn't know where the child came from, whether it was real or another trick. But the fear in the child's eyes felt too real. Behind her, she heard the goblin whispering, "Leave it. You've passed enough. You've done well. Walk away. Save your mother." She took one step back. Then the child began to cry harder, hugging its knees. "Don't leave me here. I'm scared. I want my mummy." Binta stared, clueless about what to do. The pain in her chest was too sharp to ignore. Illusion or not, she couldn't leave a little child alone in this forest. She dropped the calabash and the leaf, and walked to the child. She knelt down and held the little one close. Almost immediately, the child's crying softened. Then, the trees around her lit up in blue fire. The air roared, the forest shook, and everything vanished into nothingness. Moments later, Binta woke up lying on dry leaves, just outside the forest's edge. The sky was bright. The calabash sat beside her. Inside it, the miracle leaf floated like a charm. Her mother's cure. Binta gasped. She checked her hands. It was unharmed. Her body was whole. And in her lap was a small bag of golden cowries, shining like the morning sun. The voice of the goblin echoed one last time in her mind. "You cared, when you could have left. That is worthy of a goblin's gift. These golden cowries will establish you and your mother, and it will be a lesson for others to do good to one another." Binta didn't hesitate for another moment before she got up and ran home, clutching the bag of gold and her calabash. Her mother drank the miracle leaf's juice and woke up. The villagers couldn't believe their eyes. Even the chief came, speechless. No one ever went into that forest and returned. But Binta did. And she returned with healing, with wealth, and with a story no one could ever forget. Thank you for watching. Before you go, why not watch this video about a proud princess who married a handsome man but got the biggest shock of her life on their wedding night?